Hello and welcome to another theories video from the Netflix series The OA. I hope you enjoyed my previous videos. Check out the channel if you haven't seen my other content. Okay, so first I want to present some theories on the OA's brother and possible ideas around that character. Then let's move on to the final dimension that we see our characters go to and the possible scenarios that could be around that dimension. Is it our dimension, for example? Alrighty then, so let's talk about the OA's brother, as referred to by Old Knight. So when Old Knight said to the OA, "your brother," he was at that point referring to Kareem Washington. And I quote, he said, "In every dimension, she sends him to protect you." So before we get to who she is, and before we break down the sentence, let's dissect Kareem and that character apart. So Kareem at this point is unaware of the magnitude or the depth of strangeness of his reality. Until the very end of the season, Kareem is a very rational character and battling against spiritual and paranormal forces. His character really evolves as the show goes on, but for me I find he is almost a pawn in a game of chess, and he really didn't realize he was actually in the game of chess. So bearing that in mind, now let's talk about that sentence. So the line, "in every dimension." So in every dimension, she sends him to protect you. So was Kareem in the original dimension from season 1? We never saw him, or did we? As we have seen through these seasons, consciousness, or the soul, can jump from one dimension to another. It can take over a host, or it could integrate with them. But could we also see a consciousness deliberately put into a vessel that was different each time? So instead of the OA jumping to Nina in a different dimension, could they jump to a different vessel or a different body? Could the consciousness inside Kareem have been inside a different body in a different dimension? We've seen Rachel interact with the mirror in a different dimension, or use the mirror to, I guess, as a host to make contact with Buck. We saw her doing that for a while. So at this point, I want to bring in alias Rahim. So he was a mysterious character from season 1. A lot of theories and thoughts around Rahim, and I guess, was he working against the OA? Because he may have planted those books to discredit her, was one theory. But as we found out in season 2, that was not true. It was quite the opposite. He was working to help her. And once again, another quote here. So this is Rahim at the end of season 2. "I've been sent to help her," as he was saying that the mirror behind him as well was warping and bending, very similar to how Rachel's, when Rachel was talking or communicating with Buck, that mirror was bending and warping at the same, very similar. So with all that in mind, here are some theories around the OA's brother and who it could be in other dimensions, and just theories around this character. Clearly with this show as well, we never really get the full picture. Many parts of the story are up for debate, or you could say many parts of the story are flexible to bending to your own perspective. A lot of the show points to mythical and religious ideas, and filling in gaps of stories with your own imagination, I can often find it excels a story and makes it more memorable versus a story that's very detailed out and doesn't leave much to your imagination. So I wonder if these two characters that we're seeing are being influenced by the same entity. So for me, the entity that will be pulling the strings for these characters is Khatun. So she was obviously the helper in season 1, but she's actually missing in season 2. But regards these two characters, they've been created or been informed by Khatun. Are they the same soul, or are they the same consciousness in a different dimension? Whilst Kareem and Rahim are very different people, different physically, and they have different lives, could the consciousness inside them be connected, or could it be the same? So here are some elements which tie these characters very closely together. So they've both worked in law enforcement, so they've both worked for the FBI. Both of them as well seemed negatively affected by the experiences within the FBI, and they seemed to just want to help people. So at that point, they both took it on themselves to carve out their own path to try and help others in another way. Another interesting point. Now bear with me with this one because I really went down the rabbit's hole with this one. So it's around their names. So obviously there's a similar sound to these names. So Kareem Washington and Elias Rahim. So Kareem and Rahim sound audibly similar. And it doesn't stop with that audible similarity either. So when looking up these names, when Googling, having a few Google searches around Kareem and Rahim, these names are actually derived from the same name, Al-Rakim. So then looking up what Al-Rakim came from, where did that name come from? Apparently it refers back to the story of the Seven Sleepers. So Al-Rakim was written into one of the versions of the stories of the Seven Sleepers, and the name came from a legendary guardian dog. So I found that really interesting. So when I started looking at the story of the Seven Sleepers and found that it loosely ties in references to the OA series, but I think many religious stories probably do. There's many faith concepts, as I was saying before, spiritual and religious things. There's a lot of tie-ins here. But here's a quick overview of the story of the Seven Sleepers. So it's been retold many times and claimed by many different religions along the way. But it looks like it originated from the pagans. But in saying that, similar stories are everywhere, all across the world. But the concept is that 7 young men started following a new faith, a new religion, and that religion got them persecuted because they were following that one as opposed to the dominant one at the time. So to escape persecution, they retreated to a cave, and in that cave they fell asleep for hundreds of years and woke up to find the faith that they had been persecuted for has become the dominant one of the area. And they become legends because of this, but ultimately they die shortly after. I've condensed that story down extremely, right? I mean, it's a massive, there's many parts of the story I'm missing out, but you get the overall gist. So only later on did the guardian Al-Rakim get added. But the idea of a new faith, a new religion, I find ties in nicely with the OA. Well, obviously that's a very loose tie-in. And the number 7 as well, it's littered across many religions. But also this story doesn't always use the number 7. It uses just a small group of people. It's normally less. So in short, we have a group of faith-driven people of a new faith sheltering from persecution and being helped by a guardian named Al-Rakim. So very interesting. I thought it was quite interesting, that little rabbit hole I went down there with that one. Of course, this could be completely wrong and have no influences at all, but I just found it an interesting comparison. Coincidence or intentional? What do you think? And probably a final point regards these characters, regards Kareem and Rahim. We see Rahim, he knows that he's a pawn sent to help the OA, but Kareem seems very unaware until obviously his journey of discovery to the rose-tinted window. But just the timing of that, it took him all season to figure out that something else is going on. I mean, I think he knew things, but he didn't get the full picture. But Rahim seems to know the full picture from the very start. So we know some characters do experience amnesia, so possibly here Kareem is jumped to this vessel and he's experiencing that amnesia. But let me leave that theory there for now and on to the next part, because this video has already gone on long enough. Okay, so moving on to the final theories topic here. The final dimension that the OA arrived in, was it our dimension is the question. So let me just point out a few things here. So OA's NDE that she had when Old Night strangled her. So she arrived on a plane. It's likely to be the dimension that we see her arrive in later. As we see, she discovers herself at the end with a very similar haircut and looking very similar that she does at the end of the season when she jumps to the new dimension. In addition to that though, so on the plane we see passengers all around, of course, but we see one of them looking at a screen on the back of a seat and they seem to be watching Netflix. So you see the Netflix intro there. So you see the lines flashing. It's very similar to the Netflix current intro. So moving on to the final scene, just bear that in mind as an interesting Easter egg, I guess. But it just adds to the weight of the story here. So we also see at the end, after the OA falls down and smashes her head, she's referred to as Brit. So that's her real name in real life. And of course, Jason Isaacs that's his real name, and he has a British accent because he is English. So at this point, it all matches to obviously our real life. Also, of course, Jason and Britt are portraying actors. So they're acting out their roles within what looks to be a TV show with the sets, miniaturized sets that are from the TV show The OA. So by all accounts, you could say they are now out of the fictional world and into the real world. So they went IRL. But what is strange is Jason says, "She is my wife." Now this is not true. Jason Isaac's spouse, according to IMDb, is currently Emma Hewitt. So what does this mean? I think we've got a couple options here. So option 1, whilst this dimension is very similar to ours, it isn't ours at all. It's just another branch on the tree. Another dimension that we could have been in where these two characters are married. Apart from that, it's very similar. We don't know a lot about this dimension, of course. There could be many other things that are different, but that would be the obvious current difference. Okay, so option 2. Hap is confused and assumes that they are married in this dimension, or that he is starting to try and control the OA like he does. So he jumps on the opportunity to say, let me get in a position of power over her and say, at this point, while she's going to be possibly have amnesia again, I can claim to be her husband. So perhaps in that moment of panic, when the ambulance is there, he's saying, I'm her husband. Could it be a mistake by a confused Hap that doesn't know the full scenario? Of course it could be. Or it could be Hap, of course, playing the bad guy. So option 2 is really Hap is confused about his relationship with the OA in this dimension, or he is pretending to be her husband and it is our dimension. But anyway, I'll leave these theories here for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video has gone on way too long. The OA TV show really does give a massive plethora of theories content, which I think is a lot of fun. I think we have a few more theories to go over as well. So let me know your thoughts, of course. Thanks for all your support. And until next time, this is Mesh, and I'll see you later.